Hi, everyone.
Thank you very much for joining us. And you're in a room in London, virtually. I'm not going to say very much by way of introduction because I don't think anyone here really wants to hear from me. So other than say thank you so much for your time, I'm just going to. Andy was elected as mayor of Greater Manchester in 2017 and has been re-elected twice since. Andy has an amazing team who works on ageing, and this is not me being sycophantic. If every local authority was as good at ageing as Manchester was, then we'd be in a really good place. So I'm going to stop there and immediately pass to Andy to talk about well, I'll let you go. So, Andy.
Thank you. A very kind introduction. Good to see everybody. Hope everyone can hear me okay. I've been mayor of Greater Manchester coming up 8 years now. Can people hear okay?
Yeah.
I've been mayor of Greater Manchester coming up 8 years now, and you might remember I had 16 years in the Westminster system. And this sort of last third, if you could put it this way, of my political journey has been by far the most invigorating, rewarding, and exciting, because in this great city where I'm talking to you from, I'm proud to say, I think still the only age-friendly city region as designated by the World Health Organization. We try here to think things through bottom up, working with our residents and our communities, and it's much more kind of conducive to making good policy, I think, working in that way than anything I used to do when I was sitting in the Department of Health as Secretary of State for Health, and often not coming up with the right way of responding to the times that we're living in. I think when it comes to the way things are, my kind of take on things is as a country, we are spending huge amounts of public money, kind of sustaining people in a life that isn't what they want, be that older people stuck unnecessarily in hospital, or people in the benefit system who can't find the support they need to move forward. We've got to rethink things, in my view, away from the kind of the approach to life that we've taken for too long, which is to kind of try and run things from a series of silos in Whitehall, none of which deal with the whole person and the kind of the range of needs that one person has, all of which are dealing with part of the person, but not joining the dots and seeing the whole picture. I think the arrival of devolution in England allows us to take that whole person, whole place perspective, and we would say allows you to start rethinking the architecture of the British state, and allows you to start thinking differently about how we use public money to support people to live well, and particularly to live well in later life. And it basically opens up a much more preventative approach to things, a person-centered preventative approach, which is what we are trying to pioneer from here in Greater Manchester. And this conversation today comes at a really important moment for us, because in April we will move to a new relationship with Whitehall, where we will get our funding for the first time as a sort of block of funding, if you like, rather than all tied up in the individual Whitehall departments. We're moving to the integrated settlement, which will give us much more freedom and flexibility over how we spend our funds. Around £630 million we will have the ability to spend in a very different way. So we're ready to show there's a different way of thinking about things and a different way of working. Before I get into some specific issues about aging and living well in later life, I just wanted to outline the sort of broader Greater Manchester thinking that we believe needs to underpin this work. And this applies to to people of any age, to be honest. We think something that has to change is the approach that we've taken as a country to housing. We want to adopt the Finnish philosophy of housing first. If you don't sort out housing for people and make it right for them, you basically don't sort anything out. Housing is the foundation on which everything else is built. And we are starting to rethink how we get the housing that our city region needs. So we start with housing, and then secondly, we would argue that if people don't feel safe when they leave their home, again, they won't be able to live the life that they want to live. So strong, safe communities is the next crucial thing. Then it's around mobility, physical mobility, social mobility, connectivity. Physical connectivity, social connectivity is absolutely critical. And if all of those fundamentals are right, then you create the conditions for people to live well and live good lives. And that's the approach that we're taking here. And we are reorganizing things around those principles. As I say, taking a different approach to housing, working with Greater Manchester Police in terms of policing our communities differently, creating an integrated public transport system like London called the B Network, which will be the first integrated system outside of London. But then here's the kind of the crucial piece, launching a new Live Well service, which is a big idea that we're bringing forward from April, using that integrated settlement to start to rethink of the support that's available every day to our residents to help them live good lives, to help them connect with each other in communities, to help them to move forward. At the moment, we would estimate that of the people who are ringing their GP at 8 a.m. in the morning in Greater Manchester, about a third of those people are not, sorry, I should put it, so I think I've got my figures the right way around. A third of those people are not ringing their GP with a medical need, but with an unanswered social need. And this is the point I was making earlier about us having public services that are not actually set up to support people in the way that they're looking for support. So as we develop our thinking, I would like our GP practices to be able to refer people straight into a Live Well service. And that Live Well service, delivered through our partners in the community and voluntary sector, would be able to take a very whole person approach and support people with whatever it is that's worrying them and is holding them back, be that worries about their housing, worries about debt, worries about relationship, struggling to deal with a bereavement, the whole host of reasons why people aren't living well. We start to put in place a system that is connected to the other public services, but which all public services can refer into, so that we can start to design new solutions for people to be able to move forward. And obviously working with our partners with regards to support for older people, we want to develop a Live Well approach in later life. Live Well with dementia is something that we are very much focusing on. And for us, this is absolutely essential at this moment in time. If you were to kind of check today the number of people who are in hospitals across the UK, medically fit to be discharged but can't be discharged, I mean, that is a symptom of a system that simply isn't working for people. And if we don't turn that on its head, then I don't see how we're going to make things right or make things sustainable from a public finances point of view. As I say, it does start in the home, and we want to ensure that the investment goes in early to support people to live in their home, and that is part of our housing first approach. It's a false economy for governments of any colour to continue to cut the disabled facilities grant. It absolutely makes sense to support people to adapt their homes so that they can live independently as long as possible. And from that, of course, then be able to get out and about using an age-friendly public transport system, which is what we're putting in place in Greater Manchester, but then also looking towards employment and start to work through our Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter to start to kind of recognise what good work looks like for people in their 50s, 60s, and even into their 70s, recognising that as people get older, they may need a more flexible approach. I'm one of those people now who's kind of dealing with obviously all of my professional pressures, but with parents who are getting older, and I have kind of woken up to the challenge of that and how that is difficult as people hit their late 50s or into their 60s. I think we need to have a much more direct conversation with employers about what flexible work looks like for people at the sort of the latter stages of their career. We believe we need to use flexibilities around adult education to help older workers pivot towards new areas of the Greater Manchester economy, and we would like to see much greater devolution of employment support to enable that approach to be taken right through the life course. And beyond that, starting to think about how working age benefits start to integrate with pensioner benefits. Obviously, we've lived through a kind of topical debate recently about how we support older people. I think the time has come to start to think about how we support people through the latter stages of their working age into the point where they may be in receipt of pensioner benefits, but to do it in a much more flexible way, which allows people to maintain a level of economic activity for as long as they wish, and avoid the cliff edges around pension credit or other benefits that can often make that difficult for people. So I'll pause there because I want to leave time for questions. I guess the message from Greater Manchester is, whether people in that room in London and other cities around the world want to work with us to think through what it is to live well in later life, and how public services need fundamentally to change to be able to enable that, how homes need to be changed, and how we have a system that helps people with that making those changes, how we help people downsize possibly as they get older, and put in place services to help them do that, how communities then need to change, thinking through what an age-friendly community looks like at a local level, how we get age-friendly transport in all parts of the country, what is age-friendly employment, what does that look like, and then as I say, people go into later life, what it is to live well with dementia or with other conditions that allow people to support themselves in their community where they want to be, and not have a set of services that are based on failure. And underpinning all of this, I'll come back to a theme that I promoted very much when I was Health Secretary, how we create a way of funding support in later life that doesn't in many ways just create the clash that we see between a free at the point of use NHS and social care that is confusing, fragmented, charged for. I personally remain of the view, and I will be putting this view to the Casey Commission on Social Care. I believe if we are to help people live well in a preventative way in later life, we have to stop charging for the preventative care and then leave people unable to access preventative support in their home, only to end up in an expensive hospital bed. In my view, the time has come to think of a care system that is free at the point of use for all of that care, and then paid for differently in the same way that we pay for the NHS with an all contribution system. If we leave things as they are, I think we will leave the conditions in place where more and more older people won't get the support that they need, the quality support that they need in their in their home, and will end up then in a crisis situation, stuck in the most expensive end of the health and care system, which actually is quite a depressing vision of where we're heading if we don't step back at this point and make some fundamental changes to the British state. In my view, devolution is the life raft here. When you've got the emergence of devolution across all of England, what you have is the ability to rethink things bottom up from a place-based perspective, built around people and their needs. We've kind of hit a point here as we get into the second quarter of the 21st century where we're all seeing how things aren't working, the cracks are appearing, the unsustainability of public finances is always in the news. I believe the time has come to think things quite fundamentally. And as I say, to take an approach that is all about prevention, housing first, people living well right through the life course into later life. So that's the Greater Manchester view. We believe we can do something working with friends across the country to pioneer a new way of thinking, a new way of working. I hope some of that chimes with the conversations that you've had today, but I'm more than open to your comments, your feedback and your questions, and I'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for listening, everybody.
Thank you very much, Andy. And I think we're going to jump into questions straight away and hopefully have plenty of time. So do raise your hands, and I can see we have Alex Clash, who from ILC Brazil at the back. Alex.
Thank you very much, David. I'm Alex Clash, President of the International Longevity Center Brazil. And I happen to be the director of the WHO when we launched the age-friendly cities. And of course, Manchester has always been a big star. I would like you to explain what is the difference from what we're doing and what WHO is doing through the age-friendly global movement. And the second is that for many people, I'm speaking from a Brazilian perspective, aging in place is the worst possibility because we live in subhuman conditions. And I'm familiar as I am with the UK. There are many people that don't want to age in place. They want to age as far as possible from those horrible conditions that they have been in for 60 to 70 years.
Andy, do you want to come back on that?
I heard most. The sound wasn't great. I picked up most of it. Would you summarize the question for me, if that would be possible?
Let me pass the mic back to Alex.
Please translate.
So what was that?
Please translate.
see, let's get this mic. It's better.
Can you hear me better now?
A little, I think. Yeah, sorry.
Move forward.
I'm seeing somebody waiting. I don't know what should be doing. Is that better? Is it a question
Yes,
of getting
it
closer
is, yeah.
to Manchester?
You're nearer to us now. You're coming north.
The guy who launched the age-friendly WHO, and we have always looked at Manchester as the big star, one of the big stars. I would like you to explain what's the difference from what you are doing, from what the age-friendly global movement is doing from Geneva with over 1,700 cities enlisted. And second, you have put a lot of emphasis on housing. And yes, I heard you saying that we needed to improve housing so that people can continue to live where they have always lived. I am coming from a Brazilian perspective. Many people are living in appalling conditions with violence and houses that can no longer be improved because they are beyond any possibility. So what is the advice that you give? Because I know with my familiarity in Britain that this also happens here. People want to age away, not in place, but far away from the horrible places where they have been living for 60, 70 years.
Thank you. I hear it clearly now. On the last question, I think we need to become much more interventionist on housing, particularly housing for older people, and create much more attractive, age-friendly communities within our towns and within our cities. Because if I think of my generation, I don't think people want necessarily to go somewhere quiet. They want to go where the life is and where they can access sport, culture, the arts. And so I think we need to sort of support the downsizing process in a much more active way, to put people in appropriate housing where they want to be. And as I look as to what we're doing in Greater Manchester around regeneration, and particularly regeneration of our town centres, we envisage building much more accommodation in our towns that will be particularly attractive to the under 25s, but the over 75s at the same time, and build, if you like, intergenerational communities in the heart of places where people want to be, because they then can access the things that make life worth living. And I do come back to it. I do not believe you can have an age-friendly strategy without a housing first strategy. You can't leave housing as an afterthought here, because if you do, you won't create the conditions for people to live well in later life. And maybe that's the answer to what Greater Manchester is doing a little differently. We want people to be able to live the life they want to live, rather than, as you say, be forced to kind of live in circumstances that don't actually let them have a full and engaging life. And that for me is about putting kind of housing much higher up this agenda. We talk about aging in terms of healthcare or social care, and all of those things are important. Number one should be housing to me. And I am increasingly pioneering that as the Greater Manchester approach.
Thanks, Andy. And I was really interested in your making place work for 25-year-olds as well as 75-year-olds, in that lots of conversations with your colleagues around actually the nighttime economy is extraordinarily important for all cities, but none of it's going to survive if we just focus on 18-year-olds. So we need to work out how we redesign the nighttime economy for all ages.
Here's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I'm what you call the hacienda generation in Greater Manchester. Now, does anyone in that room know what the hacienda is, or did anyone go to that?
I think a lot of people went.
Well, it was a little club we had here in Manchester, which you might remember, and I got turned away at the door more times than I actually got let in, but I did actually get in once in a while. But the reason I mention that is because the hacienda generation is getting old. And I can promise you, the hacienda generation of my era, as we go into our late 50s and 60s, wants probably something very different, perhaps, than what our parents wanted. And we want, I think, to grow old in places where the action is, where the kind of life is, where you can access things, you can be part of things, you can contribute in later life. And I do think that is about rethinking, as I said, housing and community living for older people, particularly with that eye on intergenerational living as well, because, you know, we're living in times, aren't we, where things are becoming more divided by kind of all race, age, you name it, gender. And we need to get back to sort of promoting, I think, a different way of living and thinking, where people are, you know, contributing together. And I see an opportunity in Greater Manchester. If I look at the proud towns that circle our city, we have got huge potential to rethink residential accommodation in the heart of those places. We've done it in Stockport, and that's our first one, where we've built new accommodation. And the interesting thing actually is it's in high demand amongst the under 25s and the over 75s. It's naturally happening like that, that people are going to live in those places at both ends of the age spectrum. We want to see much more of that. And, you know, if you build to age-friendly standards, I think you make housing better for everybody, actually. You make it look more livable for everybody, including young adults with disabilities. So age-friendly housing shouldn't be like a tick box in the planning system. You have a few age-friendly units. I think you need to start building to an age-friendly standard for all housing, because you'll make it more livable for everybody.
Great, thank you very much. A couple more questions. I've got the lady at the front and then Aaron's. So why don't you take my mic?
Thank you. Hi Andy, your point about the hacienda made me think about, I was doing some research with older people about content online, and they said, please can you stop talking to us about pruning roses and start talking to us about the stone roses, and we might be more interested. And as a social app, I wonder whether you have a thought about the private sector and its role in orientating its products and propositions towards people in the kind of latter part of their lives, particularly as they kind of change into the active and passive phases of their retirement. I can see in the Far East that companies are already there, but it's not yet on the C-suite agenda here in the private sector.
I love what you said, by the way. You picked up my point very well. I think we're seeing the emergence of daytime nightclubs in Manchester. I know that happens in London as well, so that you can see the generation that's aging definitely might be thinking differently about things. I think you're onto something really, really tremendously important. How do we get the property industry to think seriously about age-friendly living, age-friendly accommodation, give people the places to downsize, and then free up homes that are then the right size for families who want them. I think there's massive pent-up kind of demand for this change, and something that's beginning to happen here, as I was saying about Stockport. We're beginning to rethink our towns as that, they circle a very successful city, and we've created a better public transport system of the kind London has long had, but we're beginning to have. If you create those age-friendly communities that are well connected as well to easy to use, easy to get in and out of the city, I think that will give people here the kind of later life living accommodation lifestyle that people are looking for. And I don't yet see the property industry as fully waking up to this opportunity. And yes, let's build in the notion of assisted living, supported living, so that people can live in those places for as long as possible. So I think maybe we need to sort of direct the industry a little bit more. We should start thinking of maybe talking about it as intergenerational accommodation. I think maybe the way to go, because we don't want to create ghettos of older people, but at the same time we need to kind of make sure that we create places that are livable and where people want to be. It's time, I think, for the property industry to catch up on some of this thinking.
In case you can't see me, but my name is Aaron Himmel, and I'm with the ILC UK and working with David. We've been working on a global healthy aging index, which ranks 150 countries across the globe on how age prepared they are. And we're currently looking to do something similar at the UK at the local authority level. And I just wanted to know how you might think that Manchester would score on such an index, how age prepared they might be, and what you and the central government would want to do, what would be at the top of your list to kind of demonstrate. Oh, is that sorry, it's still working, demonstrate that Manchester is sort of the leading place for longevity and supporting healthy aging.
I think we probably score well on our rhetoric and our words, maybe less so in terms of the reality of life in our communities. But the suffragettes who hail from here talked about deeds, not words, and I think we do need to turn more of our words into real change to be able to improve our scoring on the rating. What we do well, though, in terms of language, is stop talking about aging as a sort of a pressure, a burden, a problem. We do live, the age-friendly agenda in a very meaningful way in talking about the value that can be added. You know, I banned the phrase bed blocker when I came in as as Mayor of Greater Manchester. You know, that kind of narrative about older people that kind of creates that kind of sense of, you know, a burden and a challenge. But I think it is about, as I say, living it in a different way. Now, we have created age-friendly communities in Greater Manchester that have just kind of simple adaptations around the size of street signs, businesses that are prepared to open up their facilities, toilets when older people are out and about. I think the one thing I would say is where we've done it well, the Greater Manchester approach has not just been a public services thing. It's about an whole society thing, isn't it? Where it's public, private, voluntary, you know, every element of a society living the idea that we want to be age friendly in everything that we do, and we see aging as a wonderful, you know, a wonderful asset and a contribution that then improves society for everybody. So I think we know what we want to do. Hitherto, I think we've probably been challenged by, you know, the way in which things have been organised in the UK. If Greater Manchester was to have its, you know, its kind of full freedom to do what we would want to do, I think we could turn our words much more into reality. And I'm saying what I mean specifically by that is rethinking employment support, adult education, helping people retrain throughout the life course, rethinking the way benefits work in later life, you know, all of this, and then rethinking housing, as I've spoken about quite extensively. You know, all of those ingredients, we know what we would do if we had free reign. We haven't got free reign to do all of that, but we don't see the status quo as an option, because if we carry on trying to run things as we are in Britain, I think the lives of older people potentially could get worse and worse into the future, and we can't let that happen. This has got to be about fundamentally rethinking the British state and the way it supports people, and having a live well philosophy and a housing first philosophy running through everything that we do.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Do we have enough time for another question or two, or you've got to run off?
Maybe a last one, if that's okay, and then I'll probably leave you on.
Go here, go on. Yeah, I'll pass the mic.
Thank you, Andy. It's Fiona Carraher from Alzheimer's Society, and it's obviously we work with you in Manchester, and it's good to hear you say that you see dementia as being one of the priorities. I think it's just the huge variation that we're seeing across the UK is what concerns us and a million people with dementia. And it's really thinking that next steps about how can we learn from systems like Manchester that are doing it well, or at least trying to move to something different, because, you know, we are seeing systems, particularly in health and social care across the country, deprioritising dementia almost on a daily basis.
Well, this is a question, as I was indicating earlier, that's quite close to my heart at the moment. So my dad has Alzheimer's, and when you live it, you obviously see things, don't you, through different eyes. And I've been doing that very much in recent times. I've seen some really awful things, if I could be honest, but I've seen some wonderful things, and it wasn't as kind of maybe I expected it to be. What feels awful to me is how, you know, you see the change in your parents, and then when you know about that change before it's confirmed in a diagnosis. But what is hard is that kind of lack of what's the immediate help to live well with dementia, to live well with that, because you can, can't you? You can live well with dementia, and yet it's just not really in our narrative, really, is it at all? It's a sort of, it just kind of feels like a really dark place at times, you know, where people don't have the support and aren't given, you know, that kind of simple help with practical support when, you know, people see that journey taking place. And then you come into contact with a care system that worked okay for a bit, but you will know from the members that you have, and we found as a family, 15-minute care visits for someone whose Alzheimer's progresses to becoming more and more severe. That system in the end caused utter chaos in the life of our family when, it's not just living well with dementia. It was absolutely totally distressing for my dad. The idea that he could be moved from his bed to a kind of armchair in 15 minutes, and that could be done without causing, real challenges. I was in a position where, on a regular basis, by the time the situation became unsustainable, that I had to talk the carers, who I don't blame, by the way, who were wonderful people in many ways, but they were told to ring 999 if there was a simple problem with my dad. And I had multiple occasions have to plead with them not to do that, and not to have him ending up in a much worse place than where he was at home. Having said all of that, on the positive side, he's now in a care home where I'm just in awe of the staff who work there and what they do to bring out my dad in terms of his character. And my feeling is we could do so much better if we were just to sort of rethink what is possible for people with dementia, as opposed to what they can't have and what isn't possible, and a system that really doesn't take a very personalized view. We have a situation here in the city where we've recently been designated as a centre of excellence for music and dementia. And Manchester Camerata, in one of our cultural organisations, has pioneered dementia support sessions at Gorton Monastery. To go there is just to experience one of the most joyful things that you possibly could see, with people lifted out of themselves completely. And I don't see why we can't put in place a dementia support system that is based around music or memories that people have around sport, that is much more, simple stuff. I mean, it's not expensive, is it? It's simple, structured support that you could provide to people if you took a more live well approach to these matters, rather than, as we are currently doing, just leaving people until it hits a crisis, very expensive and unsustainable situation. So my own journey through this with my family and my mum recently has just told me that we're just doing the opposite. We're making it impossible to live well with dementia because of the way things are being done. And I think there's a very different approach that could be taken with the same money that would actually support a live well concept. And at the moment, I don't see as a country that we're facing up to it properly. I don't see the research going into Alzheimer's and Parkinson's that it should now be going in terms of it being a national priority. I don't think we're giving advice to people in their mid-years to say what can they do to perhaps prevent the onset of dementia. We almost need, if I could just finish on this point, the same approach to dementia as we had with cancer in, let's say, in the 1970s, where we just started to develop a whole society drive to try and rethink it and improve it. And I kind of feel that's the kind of sea change that we need in thinking about dementia. And I'm sorry, I've spoken at length there on what is a profoundly important question. But I have total respect for the Alzheimer's Society, Parkinson's, all the other organisations in this field. But I think you've been left crying in the wilderness for a number of years, and I don't yet see a response from policymakers that is equal to the size of the challenge in front of us. And I think it's time that we absolutely opened up to this as one of the greatest 21st century challenges we have. And until we have public services that support people with dementia as well as they treat cancer, then I don't think we will be in a world where we have 21st century ready services. Sorry, rant over at the end.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Do you have any final messages for London?
Well, one is, contrary to popular belief, I love London. I'm very proud of our capital city, and we're not anti-London up here in Manchester. And we've lots to learn from London as well, because we know some brilliant things happen in London councils. I think the time has come for the North Pole and the South Pole, Manchester and London, to work better together and actually rethink things from the bottom up in our places. And you know, I like to think that the devolution that we're starting to see across England is actually the kind of space in which these things around living well, aging well will be solved, because they haven't been solved from the Whitehall silos. I think we know, you know, in that room, we know here in Greater Manchester what would enable people to live well in later life. I think the more that we connect our places, connect our people, kind of rethink things, then eventually we'll get to where we want to be. So thank you for having me. Thank you for listening, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day.